All right.
Oh. Hello and welcome to episode 159 of the Chills at Wall. It's not the Chills at Will. It's Chills at Will podcast. I can't even say the name of the podcast right. It's a pleasure today to have Amanda Korz, and a bit about Amanda. Amanda is a graduate of Mills College in the beautiful city of Oakland, California, and is working on certificates in technical writing and user experience and web design. Her poetry witnesses previous versions of herself and intimately digs into mental illness, disability, and witchcraft. When she isn't writing or studying, she enjoys hiking, camping, and is just getting into backpacking. Cool. Those three seem like they would go together, right?
Yeah, I got really outdoorsy. I guess it was actually towards the tail end of like 2019. I went on my first backpacking trip with my now boyfriend. We went up Half Dome.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, it was quite an intense first go at backpacking, and I was not prepared. It was a whole journey.
What is that like in skiing? It's like the bunny slope and then like the, expert or whatever. Like, so you didn't start on the bunny slope at all, huh?
No, really didn't.
Well, that's awesome. And then of course, with COVID hitting, it was perfect's not the word, but perfect for outdoorsy sports and stuff, right?
Well, yeah, definitely. And that's when I got into bicycling.
Nice.
Because I was in lockdown with my two parents. I lived with them. And my dad, he's a big cyclist. Before the pandemic, he would commute to and from work on bicycle. And then on the weekends, he would do like a 30-mile bike ride at least usually. So he was really into it, and we did kind of an exchange of hobbies and interests. So he got me into bicycling and I got him to play Animal Crossing, and he played for like a year. It was incredible. Yeah, the 64-year-old man playing Animal Crossing. I had to teach him how to use a video game controller. It was great. It was a good exercise in like teaching someone something, because he's never touched it. So anything that we think is intuitive about a video game controller, left stick to move, right stick to move the camera. He had none of that knowledge, so it was really cool. And I felt like when he was teaching me how to drive.
Yeah. I think I might be closer to him than to you with like video games now. I haven't played them in so long. I think I'd pick it up again. It's like riding a bike, but shoot. Man, did Animal Crossing was that literally like created when COVID started, or had been around for a while? Because I remember it became huge around that time.
It's a franchise that's been around since the N64 and the GameCube. It came out in Japan. It came out on the N64, but there wasn't a version in America, in Europe until the GameCube.
Okay. Yeah,
it's been around a while.
I remember my students were, as so many other people, when COVID hit, it was like Animal Crossing to the extreme.
Oh yeah,
that was the thing to do.
Well, definitely. I was unemployed at the time, by choice. I was, speaking of disability, I was having a real struggle working in retail while also managing my disability. And so I decided, maybe I should stop working for a little bit and, try to figure something else out. So Animal Crossing was like a great way to like socialize with people while in lockdown, because you could like visit each other's islands, and it was something to talk about with people. But it was also great because it kept kind of the sanity in the house as we were like as the walls were closing in. But it was something that my dad and I could talk about every day, because after a while in lockdown you run out of things to talk about. Seeing the same two people every day. But I was grateful to be with my parents, because there were a lot of people my dad knew, a lot of young guys he was working with, who they live in an apartment by themselves. So I can't imagine, isolation isn't good for anybody.
Oh man.
So
there've been so many different phases of the pandemic. Like that was I mean, obviously at the beginning, which is crazy. Like lockdown, like that's not a word we hear anymore necessarily. But like it was a legit lockdown, and like there was ESPN had the series of documentaries on the Chicago Bulls, the Michael Jordan years, and like everyone was talking about that. And like you said, once that was over, like shit, what are we talking about now?
Pretty much, yeah. Just coming up like, hey, how was your? Well, I know how your day was, because
right,
spent all those hours together.
Seriously. So. I'd love to know, speaking of home life, like how you grew up. Definitely like your relationship with reading and the written word. Like, were you a pretty good transition right there, huh? Were you
Oh, yeah, that was good.
were you like like the library dweller? Were you somebody who was like reading / writing fan fiction? Like what was your
No,
experience?
so get into this. Get into this.
Uh,
I struggled to read growing up. I
really?
was in special education growing up. I had a lot of learning disabilities. I had an auditory processing disorder where,
Mm,
it took a long time for my brain to process what it was hearing. And it still
right.
does. I still have this. I have a delayed response to like jump scares when people come up
Oh,
behind me and go boo. I have a
oh,
delayed response to that because it takes my brain a minute to recognize that I
yeah.
heard something. But basically what would happen is teachers would be talking, and by the time I understood the first sentence they've said and like understood what was going on, they were already on their fifth or sixth sentence.
Huh.
So it was a struggle bus.
Oh my gosh.
I was
Yeah.
kept into the struggle bus.
Yeah.
And math was hard, everything was just a challenge because it took me so long to catch up with what was even going on.
Huh.
But so for reading comprehension, you learn by like listening to people read to you, but it took me a while to understand what was going on.
Okay.
So anyway, I struggled to read, and I didn't read my first chapter book until like fourth grade.
Mm-hmm.
And even then it was Magic Treehouse, the short ones.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I did every book report I could on Magic Treehouse. I was like,
yeah.
historical fiction,
Ah,
fantasy, you better believe,
genres.
really,
Man.
all the genres. And then eventually my my fourth grade teacher pulled me aside and was like, I need you to expand beyond Magic Treehouse.
That's good advice, but I mean, I get why you loved it. Oh man.
So anyway, so I struggled and I didn't really read for fun until middle school. Out of peer pressure to read Twilight, get into that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh yeah, but those were the first like really large books I read. Up until then, it was again those short, like for kids,
Mm-hmm.
only like 10 chapters, that kind of
Yeah.
moment. And that didn't change really. I read a couple books for fun here and there in middle school, again into high school too. And then I did middle college, where basically my last 2 years of high school, I did at community college. We had like a homeroom for our English and history, and then we could take college electives.
Okay.
And I got into the English program and taking English classes because I didn't place very well in math and science. So I was like, what can I do where you don't have to place well on a test? Intro to lit. um, Although actually I didn't take the introductory courses first. I just jumped straight into American and British lit. I
That
just
seems to
went
be a
for it.
pattern here,
Yeah,
right?
I just go
Not a
for
lot
it.
of reading and then right into Twilight, right? Not a lot of hiking and then like Half Dome.
This is who I am. I'm just like, yeah, fuck it, just go big. So yeah, I just went for it and I loved it, and it wasn't, I remember this was a British lit course, was the first one, and I didn't really understand what was going on again
Context.
until the final book we read, which was Frankenstein, which to this day is my favorite book for this reason,
Okay.
is listening to all the English majors dissect this book and the professor as well, and talk about, like the framing that's going on, all the biblical allusions, all the stuff
Yeah.
that, I had tried to read the book the year before any classes, anything, before really knowing how to like read a book like an English major. And I kind of felt like I missed a lot of it.
Are you
Well,
talking about
then,
Frankenstein in particular? Sorry, you're talking about Frankenstein
yeah,
in particular. Like you wanted to kind of like get a head start on it, kind of.
no, this was before I even knew I was going to take the
Okay,
class.
okay.
This was just something for fun. I
Yeah.
remember I kind of, I felt like I phased out of the young adult fiction. I was like, yeah, okay, sparkly
Right.
vampire boyfriend, whatever.
Uh,
She was perfectly average until she met him, okay.
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 Tropes.
Tropes for days.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know what I want to read because again, I didn't have a lot of experience reading. So I was like, I don't even know what's out there. I was overwhelmed. And then a light shone down in Barnes and Noble's on the classic section. And I was like, well, they have to be classic for a reason. I guess we'll see about that.
Yeah. Huh.
So I read Frankenstein. And anyway, so I felt like I missed a lot. Fast forward a year and I find we're going to read it again. And I was like, okay, this time I know what's going on.
Yeah.
I have the one up on everyone here. I've done this before. I show up to the discussion the next day. I'm like, oh my God, they're seeing all kinds of stuff. But it was so cool. And
Yeah.
just seeing the thought process and how people interpreted the book, I was like, oh, okay.
Mm.
So I just kept taking English classes because I didn't want to retake the math test because I was feeling salty.
Yeah.
I was like, you can't define me with a grade.
Yeah.
And
And the rest is
so
history.
anyway, yeah, I just kept taking them, and Frankenstein numerous times now. I have a collection of Frankenstein books. I have
Oh wow.
3.
You mean like different, like limited edition and this and that? Okay.
Different publishers come out with different
Mm.
versions, and I
Oh.
have there's the one that I read in school, and it's where I became an English major, so it has all post-it notes and it's
Oh yeah.
annotated and it's beat to shit. And then I
As it should
have like a nice soft cover one that is also, I annotate my books because I have a lot to say, so I like to talk back to the book.
be. Right.
And then I have like a coffee table edition that has like illustrations and stuff.
Eh.
But yeah, Frankenstein was the real turning point. Yeah, and that's kind of how I got into books, is kind of happenstance and just
Yeah. Hey, however it happens, I wonder how many people you've had to set straight, right? I'm not even fully confident on this, that Frankenstein was the doctor, not the
yes.
right. Okay.
Yes, the whole point of the book is that the creature doesn't have a name, and he wants Victor Frankenstein to claim him and name him and
Okay.
accept him. That's the whole point of the book. So it actually, it drives me up a wall. The 1930s Frankenstein is
right.
completely different from the book. The creature is very smart. He's well read. He's very articulate. He knows a lot about philosophy. So he's a very smart guy, and the whole thing is that he doesn't have a name. He's very smart, and he wants to be claimed by his father, if you will.
Yeah.
So
oh man, well I gotta think that with like the Hollywood industrial complex, there's got to be like another Frankenstein coming down, right? I mean, I think literally 2 Pinocchios just this year alone, right? I got to figure that Frankenstein's
really?
got another, like Guillermo del Toro made a Pinocchio.
Oh yeah.
And then I don't know who made the other one, but I think somehow Tom Hanks was Geppetto. I think it was terrible. Yeah, my kids watched a little bit of it, and I think I just saw it get panned. But so Frankenstein maybe remade or redone or reimagined. Oh man,
I hope so. Because currently the best film version is it's one with Helena Bonham Carter's in it.
Oh, okay.
And but it's still very campy and a mess. To this day, Frankenstein has not been done justice.
Right. Well,
I'm still salty about it.
Maybe that's up to you.
There we go. I have to get into directing.
Yeah. So as you got into, so first of all, so when you said middle college, I always thought middle college with like a capital M, capital C. Like I know a school down in LA called that. Like, is it like,
oh no, that was just the name of the program.
Okay. But it's like generic, like it's okay.
There's one at De Anza College, which is where I went to, and then there's one at Foothill College up here.
That makes sense. So it's like an in between, it's like a transition.
Yeah, it's a transitional.
Okay.
Kind of. The kids like want to do more, but still need homeroom, which was great. Yeah.
As you got into the later, like your later education, like who, and even up until now, like who were the writers that really just, or the pieces, or the text, the poem collections, the short stories, whatever, who were the ones and the actual works of art that really just changed your trajectory?
Definitely. So, from about 2012 until I graduated Mills College in 2019, I was an English major. That's what my associate degree is in. That's what my bachelor's is in. So I was reading a lot of things. I was just consuming as much literature as possible. I took everything. But I think what stood out to me most was Allen Ginsberg.
Okay.
Beatnik extraordinaire. Yes. And while I don't agree with him politically, because he is a very troublesome figure, he had some interesting things to say. But if you listen to a recording of him reading Howl, and you listen to a recording like one of the open mics or from the reading tour that I did, and you listen to me read, you can see that he's definitely one of my major influences in rhythm, in how I perform my poetry, because that was my first exposure, listening to him perform Howl. That was the first time I really heard a poet perform their work. So I took a lot of inspiration from that, but also rhythm, and even, the rawness and um,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah. So Allen Ginsberg for me is like the major influence for sure.
Like that got him arrested, right?
Yeah, there was a obscenity trial for Howell.
Mhm.
Because keep in mind this was the 50s and he's writing about like gay themes and sucking cock and
Oh, yeah. Not Leave It to Beaver,
yeah, it's definitely, so that kind of paved the way, as I understand, for writers to really be able to be a little bit more actually honestly explicit and just be like, this is art, so you can't really say that it's
Uh,
obscene.
yeah. Well, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you growing up and living in the Bay Area, there's obviously a big activist and big,
Mhm.
history and history of poetry and the beatniks and all that. So that's really cool. That's really cool that you got in that. Um, I don't know how new the copywriting is and the technical writing is. Like, I wonder how that like informs your creative writing.
Yeah, so that's fairly new. And I actually did get my technical writing certificate. It's amazing how much changes from the time that your little author bio is written.
Huh.
But yeah, so I got that actually in April this year. I
Okay.
finished that.
Cool.
But yeah, I've been a technical writer for a year now, been at my current position for a year. And, I think the main thing for technical writing, you write like user guides and kind of like, this is how to use a software and, stuff like that.
Okay.
Um, and I think the main like skill a technical writer has is being concise and precise.
Sure.
You want to be like, you don't want to go on a whole journey just to tell them how to
Yeah.
edit something.
Yeah.
So no one wants, if you have like a problem and you're troubleshooting your iPhone, you don't want to read the whole War and Peace on the history of the iPhone. You want quick
Some
answers.
people
Go
maybe do.
here.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Go here, click this, done. And I think, because most of my poems are not very long.
Sure.
So I would actually say that kind of translates over where I have these short, very punchy lines. And I think that is kind of the technical writer influencing the poet.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I'm, the classic, like the worst 4 words in the English language are some assembly required. Is that 3? So
Three.
that's 3. I can't count. So that's I appreciate the conciseness, but it sounds like you get the job done. Cause I always read these things. And again, this is on me because I don't understand these things, but I read this. I'm like, how is that picture? And you make it so easy. And even the YouTube tutorials. Anyways, man. So I got to assume a lot of second person in what you write, or not necessarily?
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of you.
You will see this.
Uh-huh.
So, and that's where, there's the major difference for me. For my writing, I write about me.
Uh-huh. Well, okay, so 100% Amanda Korz, 90% partially. You're not even sure yourself. Like, how much is
100%.
narrator?
It's all about me.
100%. Yeah.
The most interesting thing to write about.
Yeah, obviously. Okay.
It's not even that I think I'm that interesting. I think it's just, I don't know. Because for a long time, here's how I got into writing poetry. Let's get into that.
That's a good transition. Nice.
Yeah, see, I'm good.
You're really good.
I started, so I started in high school. I was about 16, and this was the year before middle college. And I, for some reason, decided I was going to take physics.
Okay.
Mistake.
Fair enough.
Mistake. I was trying too hard.
Yeah.
I was in geometry at the same time. That was my math level, and I was also. Why did they let me sign up anyway?
Why did they?
Why? Who approved that?
Right.
But anyway, so I was taking physics. I was lost and confused, and I was like, I'm never going to get this, which is correct. Even when I tried and studied really hard, I still didn't get it. And I had the formula like written down and I still got the wrong answer. So I was like, okay, fuck it. This is not my gig. So instead of paying attention, I started writing poems. Because a lot was going on for me emotionally at the time. That's when my mental illness started presenting itself. I had some stuff going on at home with my older sibling. They were having a really hard time. They were going through some stuff. So it was a really dark place. So I decided to start writing because I could, because I wasn't doing anything else. I was bored. I was like, trajectory, velocity, whatever. I don't care.
Sure.
So I started writing and they were awful. They were cliche, but that wasn't the point, really.
Yeah.
The point was I was feeling that depression was getting to everybody I knew. So I felt like it was like a cancer and it was spreading. It was getting it. My older sibling had it, a bunch of my friends, and so many people in the news were dying of suicide after coming out. So I was like, holy shit, man. So it was a way to get through that. And then as I was reading more literature and becoming more of an English major, then my tone and stuff shifted. I got more of a style. I knew I wanted to write free verse. I didn't want to do sonnets.
Sure.
Love you, Shakespeare and all.
Do you though? Do I? We do.
I don't. I'm an unpopular English major where I don't care for Shakespeare. I know, controversial.
Oh, I'm totally in agreement.
I'm like, yeah.
I mean, I guess game. I'm not going to say that I have the same game as him, but like, I guess game recognized game. But like, come on, like, yeah, That's the whole. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's a whole thing. No, I get it.
The whole thing.
Everyone is forced to read Shakespeare, so we all have a feeling about it. We all
exactly.
We all went through that. It's awful.
We all feel some type of way, as they say. Yeah.
But I feel like when I went to Mills and I started doing the open mics there, the MFA students, which Matt was one of them. Matt and I go back.
Shout out Matt Mejia, Nervous Ghost Press.
Oh yeah, right at the roots, man. So that's actually where we met, is at those open mics. I was one of the few. Crew. Man, yeah, I was one of very few undergrads who would show up and read at them. Because I was just like, well, whatever. I've been published, my community college, I was published in their literary magazine. That was the first time I was published. And from there, and reading my work the first time at the like publishing party, I got a real taste for it. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I enjoy this. I like writing. I like performing my work. This is really cool. So I go to Mills and I go to these open mics and people respond and they seem to enjoy it. And yeah, kind of the rest is history. I took some more creative writing courses while I was at Mills. And one of my professors, Arisa White, I think she really also one of my major influences too, as like kind of a mentor. And she really taught me to just like own my own experiences and just write it. Fuck it, who cares? She really instilled that in me. And I remember when I turned in my final, she was like, you could publish these. And it wasn't anything that's in this book, but I remember, she kind of gave me the confidence, and she was the first one to really say like, you could get published and you could go far with this.
That's awesome.
So that was really awesome. And yeah, I go way back with Nervous Ghost. And Matt, because so I've known him from college, so from like college parties, and of the few that we went to, there wasn't that many at Mills. Mills was not really a party school.
Right.
But
ain't no party like a Mills college party.
Oh yeah, real party animals. No, it's just a bunch of cat moms and vapes. But
that's pretty funny. When you were talking about like I just lost my train of thought. So like that shining light, not the one in Barnes and Noble, but that shining light when you did Frankenstein, and people were like, oh man, illusions and history and context and all that.
Yeah.
Like as you read now, like do you read with the mind of like a critic, not critic in the negative connotation, but like are you like looking at like structure and like the way things are put together? And if so, does that like take away from just like pleasure reading?
It's a little bit of both. It's less intense now that I don't have to read for a grade.
Yeah, right.
With that, it's kind of a shame. With all the reading I've done, I didn't really retain a lot of it because it was just like on to the next one, on to the next one. This is an illusion, this is that. And I didn't really get to enjoy it because it was just like, you have to read this and you have to read Great Expectations in 2 weeks. And it's like this big honking book. I also don't like Charles Dickens. No.
Same.
Okay. Same. I'm like, no, forget it. Yeah. Scrooge was your best work because you had to be concise and you weren't published serially for that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, with Great Expectations and his other novels, they were published serially and he was paid by the word. So there's a lot of repetition and very lengthy. And I'm like, can you just edit it? And I think that's also the technical writer in me coming out and being like, get to the point.
That's interesting. Okay, so that's why Scrooge is so good.
Yeah, that's why his short stories are great, because he's to the point, concise. Get to it.
I know a decent amount of writers like that.
Yeah.
You know? Sure. Oh man.
Mm-hmm.
The collection is Just a Little Blood, and here it is if you're watching at home. And I'm looking at the back. You've got some great blurbs.
Mm-hmm.
I know Mike Songson very well, Mike the Poet, Anne Marie Wells, Hillary Brown, Inside Cassandra Lane, some great ones. Yeah. And so I wonder about like page 48. That means nothing unless you're looking at the book, but the poem
look at that.
Right? You're like, oh yeah, I know Phaedron. No, the poem.
Yeah, I know. I haven't memorized to the page. I actually don't.
Great title, because it says so much. The title is He Read a Science Textbook Once and Decided That Was Good Enough.
Yeah, right? That actually wasn't in there for the first draft when it won the prize. That was added later.
And I feel like it's I mean, there's so many different poems throughout that could be like, you know, representative of the book as a whole, but I feel like it's a really interesting pivot, and it, you know, it says a lot about what I think the book is about, is, and obviously I want to ask you because you're the one who wrote it, but a lot about just like ignorance, especially from men. Yeah. Right. The great line you have is that your quote, your understanding of my month is best described as public school sex ed. Yeah. Right. I'm reminded recently of like a lot of like social media fails, right, where they ask men, you know, it could be on Twitter, right? They ask men like, what do you know about menstruation and, you know, menstruation, etc. Yeah, and, you know, it's just, they show them a pad and they're like, do you know what this is? And they're like, right. Right. It depends. And I'm talking way too much. So like, what, you know, just the idea of like, I guess some of the seeds for the book, did it come from a lot of this ignorance? And, you know, ignorance doesn't have to be a negative thing. It might means you literally don't know, but it also has that connotation of like willfully ignorant and all that. So I guess kind of like where's some of the seeds for the book and what it has to do with ignorance. Sure.
So, you know, that poem, I was writing and editing the book, I did interview my now boyfriend. At the time of the book, he was my friends with benefits. It's complicated, etc. So there is a redemption.
He was an interviewee? Did he know he's an official interviewie?
No, he didn't.
Record. Okay.
I just started quizzing him. I was like, so what do you think happens here? Like, what? And he perfectly recited like from a textbook. He's like, it's about 28 to 30 days. I was like, oh my God, someone help this man. But it was interesting, like what of the education stuck with him. And it was just like, okay, well, and I thought it was so funny when he said we become bitchy. I was like, okay.
Well, that's a great part of the poem too, because you in the poem, you or the speaker is like, okay, well, can you pinpoint the change? And it's like, well, not really, no, you know. So, you know, just shows, I mean, all of myself, including, you know, all of our ignorance, and and I'm sure you have ideas about whether that's willful or not. But so like, you know, obviously it can be a taboo subject, right?
Yes. Well, and that's why I think a lot of people didn't want me to read the book at their bar or whatever. And I think that's part of why we were only able to get 2 places to have me read, is because a lot of places were like, you know, a lot of like mom and pop bookstores are not going to want me saying like, my pussy's bleeding, you know? As their kids are like shopping for Twilight.
Sure. They still buy Twilight.
You know.
I don't know if they still buy Twilight, but I get your point.
Yeah. But, you know, it's, you know, it is a very kind of controversial subject, which is kind of funny. It's like half the population goes through this in some form. But that was also why I wanted to write it. It was kind of, it started as a dare to myself in a way. Really? Yeah. Well, actually, here's how it really started. The first poem, Dirty Soap. That poem came to me while I was in the shower. That actually happened. You know, my period started, and those first lines of the poem popped in my head as it was happening. And I was like, oh, and then I was writing the rest of the poem in my head and I was like, okay, I better hurry up. And so I came out quickly threw a robe on. I wrote the poem, and then kind of like struck by lightning, I had more ideas and I wrote another 2 poems right after.
Wow.
And and then I finished getting ready, and I'm like soaking wet and I'm writing poetry.
This is like pen and paper? Is it on the computer? Or?
This was on the Notes app on my
Oh
phone.
yeah, there you go.
All Apple. Oh yeah.
Yeah, right.
And
Product placement.
Cupertino girl.
Hey,
But yeah, so then I was editing them, and then the next day happened, and I was looking at them again, and I wrote more, and I just kept writing more, and I was like, I have like 15 or so poems. Can I write a full manuscript? And it became kind of a dare. And it's like, how far can I push this? How far can I write about this one subject? So it became kind of a writing exercise in a lot of ways. And part of the goal too was to just give myself permission to state how my body is feeling and how it is. And kind of a jealousy that young boys and even men still, they can be like, oh, I farted, anytime. And men have full permission to do that. They're like, burp, that's
like some comedians like whole act.
Yeah, a lot of them. We watched a lot of comedy specials recently. That's like what my family does for dinner. We'll like have our dinner and watch a comedy special. Whole routines, just dedicating.
Yeah.
Comics will be like, I farted, I pissed myself because I got so drunk, like this whole thing. Whereas women, we can't really say a lot of that. So I wanted 60 or so pages to just do that. I wanted 60 pages where I didn't have to be cute for anybody, where it wasn't about the male gaze, where it didn't have to be pin up and push up bra, where it could just be like, this is the tea, and you can either man up and read the book, or you can see yourself out. And it was funny at one of the readings, this man sat down, and I was like, oh, he's in for a surprise.
He's in for
he's in for a surprise. I read like the third poem, and then he just quietly got up and left the bar. I was like, I admire you for staying as long as you did, sir.
And ordered the book later that night. Who knows? Maybe he got one.
Never know.
I don't know if it's the I'm sorry, Dirty Soap. Is that the
first one?
I don't know if it's that one or not, but really early on, I mean, there's obviously a lot about men's ignorance, which again, could be a neutral, but there's also about, men's toxicity, right? Some great lines about like, blood is, quote, seen as repulsive, but war is fine, but a monthly 80 milliliter bloodshed is unspeakable.
Yeah.
And then the last line is, at least I can wash this blood away.
Yeah.
That's a great line.
I think of a lot, growing up, all the boys playing Call of Duty, and they're like, or like Grand Theft Auto, and they're like torturing people and like beating them with crowbars, and
no big deal.
Video game blood. Whereas if they had to do any of that in real life, by the way, they would be shaking, crying, throwing up.
Right.
But they're talking about all this and like all these gory movies and stuff. But then as soon as I like go to my friend and say, hey girl, do you have an extra tampon? They're like, whoa, whoa, that's
Step
crazy.
Too far. Yeah.
Too far. And I'm like, first of all, excuse me. I'm like, it's not that much blood. And which was also part of the title, is kind of both sides saying it's just a little blood, where people who are lacking empathy will be like, who cares about this? Who cares about your pain during this? It's just a little blood. But it's also for us to reclaim and be like, why are you so grossed out? Why is this such a problem for you? It's just a little blood. So it's kind of both sides saying that.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. I was thinking of it more from the woman's side, but that makes sense. Like, come on, like, buck up. It's just
people advocating for days off for menstruation, because some people get it really bad. I'm one of those people where like I get really faint because due to the IUD, my blood, it has the copper lining, so that makes the blood loss heavier and more painful. Definitely heavier. So I get really anemic is the thing. No matter how many iron supplements or like burgers I have, it's like I'm still going to be a little bit out of commission.
Well, in the poem that describes the putting in the IUD, it's,
oh god,
nurse was basically right. Yeah,
it was awful, hands down awful. A lot of people are saying you should really have some anesthesia for that procedure, but doctors really just minimize the pain. They're like, oh well, women go through childbirth, so this is not a big deal. And it's like, no, it's a big deal.
Well, like I was struck by like one of the nurses was basically like, it could lead to heavy bleeding or none at all. It's like, toss up, like, I'm not sure which one.
Oh
I was like, oh
God,
my
yeah.
gosh, the
Well,
uncertainty
when
of
it
it.
comes to women's health, you get a lot of answers like that. We're like, this will either make it better or make it worse. I
Right.
mean, who knows?
Much
You're
worse
like,
or much
cool.
better. Oh my gosh. And so speaking of like the ideas of like I mean of the different genders and stuff, like so you write in one of the poems that there's no god of mischief for men, right? Men, like, I took that as
Yeah.
like, right, like you said, men are very upfront, men are out there, and women Artemis, but people don't know about it, and there's just this need for women to have this sort of mystery, right?
Yeah, well, that was my way at poking fun of men. Like, you don't have a god of men's mysteries. You're not that
Huh.
mysterious. Are you that interesting and complicated? Perhaps not. I was just poking the bear with that one. But yeah, but it also goes back to like historically and even now, menstruation is supposed to be very, it's mysterious. You're supposed to keep it
Mm,
hidden.
sure.
There's, you know, you keep it separate. I remember growing up in sex ed classes, they were like, and if you get your period and you need something, pull us aside and whisper that you
Oh boy.
need yeah, which